What is up, everybody? Welcome to unit number 5, part 2A, which is the start of the Industrial Revolution. And just kind of a reminder, this is 1750 to 1900. There's a couple different things that are going on during this time period. One is the Enlightenment and the political revolution. So, for example, the French Revolution starts in 1789, and we're kind of jumping back. This time period of the start of the Industrial Revolution happens a little bit before that. We're also, the third part of this, Unit 5, is on imperialism, which we'll eventually get to. But this part of the Industrial Revolution, we'll have a couple videos. You want to get down? All right. We'll have a couple parts. So just want to get into number one. What is the Industrial Revolution? If you've never talked about this before, if this is something that's never come up in a class before, really it is the shift from agricultural and farming practices to an industrialized society. What does all that mean? Number one is usually in most pre-industrial societies, most people farm for a living. Could be anywhere from, maybe you'd see in the before the French Revolution, for example, 80% of the population was farmers. Could be all the way up to 95 to 99% of the population is farming for a living and for a livelihood. What we see after this time period of the Industrial Revolution is most people are going to start working in factories, whereas before they'd be farmers, now they're working in some other job that doesn't require them to farm. So we're going to have a small group of people who farm, provide food for the vast majority of people who are working in factories or other jobs. Similar to the United States today, for example, you probably don't know anyone today who is a farmer or farms for a living. You might have a garden in your backyard, but most people you know probably aren't farming. If you had gone back to 1700, you would definitely know, and most people you would know would be farmers. So kind of a little bit different, but this Industrial Revolution doesn't happen one day. It's not like, in 1750, all of a sudden we are industrialized. It's a progression of events that happen, and those events generally build upon each other. Similar to like cell phones, for example. When the first iPhone was created, they didn't know what the iPhone 7 was going to be, and they didn't know what Samsung was going to make, and they didn't know what other companies were going to have and what it was going to entail. But they've kind of built these inventions upon each other to make it kind of what it is today. So the first thing is this Industrial Revolution is going to start in Great Britain. If you don't know where Great Britain is, Great Britain refers to these three parts of Scotland, England, and Wales. That is this island right here. Generally, the power in Great Britain lies in this part of the island called England. And a lot of times we kind of interchange England and Great Britain with each other. But for the sake here, we're going to call this Great Britain. Also, if you've ever heard of the term United Kingdom, it refers to Northern Ireland as well, which is part of the United Kingdom and under the control of Parliament and the Queen. And then we also have the British Islands here. Anyway, why Great Britain is able to be the start of this Industrial Revolution is they have great geographic features. It's ideal to start this Industrial Revolution. Number one, they're near the Atlantic Ocean. It allows for easy access to trade, which we saw in the previous time period, a little synthesis, when they set up their colonies. So because of this access, it allows them access to goods and materials and products that otherwise they might not have, and they have access to ports. Number two, they have a lot of access to natural resources within Great Britain itself. Everything you see here in this bluish purple color are rivers in Great Britain. There's a lot of rivers that zigzag and crisscross with each other. And with these rivers, you also are going to have canals that are built to connect. So a river here, you want to transport goods, you build a canal between the two areas. Also, they have resources of timber, a lot of forests, a lot of areas that they can utilize this wood for. Number two, they have coal. At first in this Industrial Revolution, the factories that are built are powered by water, but eventually we're going to utilize coal instead, and they have access to coal. And number three, they have iron, and iron is going to allow them later in the Industrial Revolution to build heavy machinery, to build railroads, to build railroad cars, which is going to be beneficial. Also, they have access to foreign resources. Don't forget, at the start of this period in 1750, the British still have their American colonies and their colonies in the Caribbean, and they're able to utilize these to get materials and resources back. Also, we have areas on the coastlines of India that are under the control of British merchants, who are bringing goods back. So all of this is happening, but it really comes down to their geography and how their geography works to their advantage. Number two, we have a population shift that's going to happen in England during this period of 1750 to 1900 and really exists in any industrialized country. So coming down here to our chart, this is England over the years. So we have the Dark Ages. This is the Middle Ages right here. You see the dip in population here, which is due to the Black Death until about the 1500s or so. And then this is what we're looking at right here. This is at the start of the Industrial Revolution. Check out their population, which goes from about 5 million to about 10 million in the course of 100 years. That is a crazy population jump, doubling the population. If the population is increasing, it should let you know that there is a better food supply. And what people in England realized and Britain realized at this time was that they could plant different crops. They learned about crop rotation and better crop rotation. They also learned that, for example, you could plant beets, and beets, not like the headphones, but beets, bad joke, beets would allow you to grow things that can grow in the wintertime and can survive cold, rough winters, whereas other crops might not survive something like that. Also, random fact, they learned to plant clovers, and by planting clovers, it would re-enrich the soil and allow for a greater yield of your harvest. So these practices are important. It increases the population. Also, with population increase, a lot of people start moving to urban areas, which is urbanization. So you see people moving to these urban centers, which allows for more workers who can work in the factory and who have the ability to work. So number one, we have geography. Number two, we have increase in population. And number three, we have a lot of money floating around in Great Britain. Because of all these overseas colonies and this trade, we have a lot of money that is flowing into the country, which is leading to a lot of wealthy people. Why are wealthy people important? Because if you want to build a factory or factories, you need the money to start up that business. Basically like a startup. You need people who are like Shark Tank investors who are willing to invest in your idea, in your product, and to pump money into that. And because of this capital, which is money, and again, capital just means money that you can invest. Because of this, we have money flowing into the country, which allows for the building of these factories. Also, kind of a side note, there is protection of private property in England, which is an important thing, meaning that people own their property and they know that the government is not going to take their private property away. When you buy property, it becomes yours, which allows you to build on that, which allows you to buy property and then create factories, and you're convinced that it's going to be your property forever and the government's not going to do anything and take that property away. So with the Industrial Revolution, there's kind of two parts to it. This is kind of like the overview. The first part of the Industrial Revolution is 1750 to 1850. It's primarily in Great Britain. And we have these factories that are going to be created primarily producing textiles. And textiles is just a fancy way of saying cotton. So, for example, if someone was going to make a shirt, or in this case, a sweatshirt, they would take the textiles, the cotton, and England doesn't have cotton, so they're getting it from overseas, whether they're getting it from the Americas, whether they're getting it from India. The cotton is coming into the factories and they're producing something as a result. That's the first half, primarily textile based. The second Industrial Revolution is going to spread. So we're going to see the spread into Western Europe and the United States. And it's going to be less about textiles and more about producing heavy industry, steel, the invention of and production of different chemicals, also the production of electricity. So this heavy industry is really going to be the focus of the second half. So just kind of to point out and keep in mind, there's really two different parts of the Industrial Revolution. Again, the first one on textiles, the second one on heavy machinery. Some of the effects, the initial effects, and the effect number one that I want to talk about is just technological. We're going to have a lot of new inventions, and these new machines, for example, someone's going to realize that by using coal, you can power engines, and by powering coal engines, then the coal is burned and it's heated up, and when it heats up, the steam that it releases powers an engine. You can eventually build railroads, and up here is a map of the railroads in Western Europe specifically. And the more railroads you see, generally the more industrialized the country. So this is Great Britain. You can see France right here. This is what's eventually going to become Germany. Spain, not so much. Portugal, not so much either. Russia over here, not so much industrialized. But if you have these railroads, it not only allows people to transport goods, and people can transport themselves as well, but it also gives you greater access to fossil fuels and resources, because you can go and explore areas and bring things back from these areas that you generally couldn't have before. So it opens up more areas that you can mine for coal, eventually oil, iron, and these things are going to be important. So down here, if you look at this map of Great Britain, you can see the coal fields are in orange. And if you can build railroads, you can get railroad access to these areas and ship them back to the main area that you need. Also, we've increased transportation and communication. We have new inventions that are going to allow for greater transportation and also just allow for communication between people and societies, which is going to be important. So one, as I mentioned before, the canals, and this is an example of a canal in Great Britain. Right here, you can see as you go down here, you can see the locks on the canal, and the ship or the boat will eventually be able to come up. As water flows up into this canal, it'll push the boat up, and then it'll be in the next part here, but it allows transportation through areas that wouldn't have been able to be to transport things before. Also, we have steamships. This is the example of a steamship that would have been used. It would have been powered by coal. You can see the smokestack coming out of here. You wouldn't want to breathe that. And these steamships allow for faster travel by boat, which allows for faster transportation of goods. And last but not least, we have the telegraph line. These are kind of like old school telephone lines. You would use this for Morse code. So like doot, 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 doot. That's all I know. And this is, you would have these throughout cities. They also ran under the ocean. So below the ocean, at least sea level, where you could communicate between England, for example, and the United States, or England and eventually India. So you could immediately, and these electric shocks or electric pulses would allow the reader on the other end to know what the message is. And it would allow almost instantaneous, not quite instantaneous as like we would imagine an email today, but pretty close to it, where the message could be sent and you could exchange ideas or know what's going on. If there's a rebellion somewhere or you need more of a product, that could be exchanged, as opposed to sending a letter and traveling all around the coast of Africa. So that's kind of the basic stuff, just the first part of this, just a little bit of the effects, especially technological. And the other one, we'll get into more of how the global effect of this, and also some of the new ideas that come out of this. But as always, write down any questions if you have any, and let me know. Thanks. Have a good one.